Thank you again, Yinka, for being here. So, Yinka, you are a lecturer
Yes,
uh,
I am.
at the university. You're also the deputy director of studies
Yeah.
at your department at Henley Business School. Um, we know you didn't just suddenly appear at this position. So, could you just give us a brief walkthrough of your journey, especially academic? Where you've come from. You could also mention like your background and how you've come to this point. If I think that would be
Okay.
interesting to hear.
It's been an interesting journey. It's been um, quite fascinating to and very, you know, funny as well. Funny in a lot of ways. So I was born and raised in Ibadan in Nigeria, Oyo State, and that's where I spent the first 18 years of my life, so to say, and of course I went through primary, secondary school there, and it was at the point where I was going to crossing into the university that I moved over to Lagos. Maybe I should say something here as the first kind of nugget. I don't know who might get this. I failed JAMB, I think twice, once or twice, in spite of the fact that I was a scholarship student in primary school, and in secondary school I was one of the stars of the set, so to say. But I still failed JAMB, twice. Was I bothered? Maybe a bit, because of course, um, then the part of what we wanted to always talk about was that you finish school and immediately you kind of transition straight into university, no
Yeah,
gaps, no delays.
yeah,
That was kind of like the pride of it. It was like a one hit strike thing
yeah,
that seemed to kind of govern how well you feel. And if you didn't make it into university immediately after secondary school, you find yourself ducking your head a bit and not wanting to go for social events because people always want to ask you, okay, so where are you now, and all
yeah.
that stuff. So for me, not making jam the first time was bad in itself. The second time, not that I didn't pass, I passed, and I think I got 200 and something, but it just wasn't going to be good enough to do whatever it is that I thought I was going to do. Did I even have anything I wanted to do? I didn't. I was one of those guys. I had a subject combination that could do virtually anything outside of the arts, anything in the social sciences and the sciences and engineering and medicine and everything. I had the right subject combination to do anything. So I was
Mm,
confused. I had economics, I had further maths, I had, you know, everything pretty much. So I wasn't really sure what I was going to do. So it was then I, got into the diploma program at the University of Lagos, where I, kind of that was like crossover into Lagos, so to say. Got into University of Lagos, did a diploma there. I remember, I had filled in computer science a day before the diploma exams took place. I remember having a chat with my dad, and my dad said, "This computer science thing you want to do, why are you wasting your time when people, these days don't go to university to study anything computer. You can just go to any of these certification centers, and the guys who are the gurus of tomorrow are not going to university to study this thing, at least not in Nigeria. I mean, these
yeah,
guys sit down at home, teach themselves, go to institutes, learn the coding language, and bullseye, they're there." So I was thinking, I'm thinking, yeah, yeah, this man is right, to be honest, because I had done Oracle 9 then. So I just, went back. I remember going to withdraw my card and filling in estate management. And my father said, "Whoa, estate management? I mean, what's wrong with you?" I'm like, I looked through the brochure and I felt, I don't know what to do. I don't want to do sciences. I don't want to do engineering. Let me do social sciences.
yeah.
My passion originally was to do theater arts.
Mm,
As
interesting.
crazy as that may sound, but it never came to be because my father was like, "Not under my roof will the child say he's trying to do something that we're not sure where his next meal will come from," and so on. So it was all this whole thing of not being sure. I chose estate management, and yeah, I went and did estate management, finished the first class, came out from Unilag, and went to serve in Abuja. Those were formative years that I will never forget and will always cherish, because those years, I met really good people. Those years gave me the ability. I think those years helped me test the values that I had built or that my parents had also instilled in me over the years, and also tested my integrity to those values, because it's one thing for you to be raised in a particular way, but when you have the freedom to get out there, you can choose to reinvent yourself by choice, either in rebellion to what you thought what you've been given growing up that you didn't necessarily buy into, or out of just pure adventure or youthful exuberance of wanting to just live your own life. And you could go out there and reinvent yourself. I did reinvent myself, but I didn't reinvent myself in a bad way. I didn't reinvent myself by letting go of the values that I thought were critical to
Mm.
sustaining the kind of life I wanted to live or the kind of life I envisioned myself. Those were the years where the window to my soul was pretty much powered by my imagination, and I did quite a lot of thinking. And I still have all those books with me, journals where I will sit down and I will predict the future and imagine the future, and just sit down and just paint what I wanted my future to look like. And I began to put timelines to things, and that was when I began to realize the power of vision, the power of envisioning, the power of writing down visions, making them plain, and also that God listens when you do these things, and that the always opportunities will respond to the dominant picture you have in your head. So this is not a bit of a sermon, but when I was reading, I love the book of Genesis in the Bible because it's the book of beginnings. Because Genesis is from the word genes, right? Means the root of every human, of the root of creation. And I remember, when I was reading, I think the first two chapters there was saying something about the fact that God said and God saw, and God said and God saw. And in my mind, even though I wasn't necessarily a sound Christian then, and this is just me being honest with you, I wasn't a praying in tongues kind of Christian. I wasn't any. I just saw this thing, and I was just from through the eye of curiosity. I'm like, this sounds exciting. Like, how can someone just be saying something and be seeing it? And I'm like, man, this guy be saying something and be seeing it. Maybe me too. I should take this thing up and start saying things and start, saying maybe I'll see. And I began to say things, that were crazy, that sounded ridiculous, and everything that I'd written, pretty much 90% of them had come to pass, as at last year or this year, so to say. And so that was it. So it was about the creative. I saw the creative force that there was creation happened. But when you go into the next chapter, you discover that even though he had created man in chapter one, there was still no man physically until he formed man. And so that spoke to two powers, the creative energy and the formative energy. One is in your imagination, the other is in your hands. And that was when I knew that dreaming was not good enough if my hands will not match up to my dreams. So you can dream big, but ultimately you've got to put in the work. And that's where people miss it. People dream big, but don't know what it takes. Because
Yeah.
when you create, you've got to form. So
Yeah.
people know how to create, but little few people know how to form. So I knew how to create. So I knew those years were my creative, zones. And I immediately I created those dreams in my head. I was ready to put in the work for them. So I went to serve and I served in Abuja. I lived a very, chaste life, so to say. I couldn't afford living in the city. So I was living in Nasarawa State. I was traveling from Nasarawa State into Abuja, and I
Yeah.
couldn't even make it to work often. I was living in Yanya Marapa, if you know those zones.
Yep.
Um, and I was living somewhere in one of those coppers lodge there, and I was living in a room with like five other guys, one tiny cubicle like that. My mattress was like 2 inches thick. It was all crazy. I never complained one day. It was, for me, it was all just fun and adventure. And being able to live through that season of life was very crucial. Came back to Lagos, um, got scholarships to study here, Birmingham, Warwick, because my dad had developed a terrible illness. His prostate cancer caught up with him. I didn't know he had it until then, so it became very difficult. So I had to forfeit all my scholarships, and then
Mm.
somewhere down the line, after looking after him for a few months, he became better. And then he looked at me and said, "What are you going to do with your life?" I'm like, I can't do anything now because I've got to look after you. He said, "No." He said, "You go, off you go, find somewhere to go." So I found I applied to so I lost Birmingham. The admission was there, but the scholarship was gone. I lost
Mm.
Warwick. The admission was there, but the scholarship was gone. So at this point, it meant I had to pay for it. I had Reading. There was no scholarship, but there was an admission. And I had, because I read estate management in University of Lagos, I had applied to study estate management at the University of Reading, as well as international management. Why international management? Because when I was in Reading, there was this trend. So this is one another thing I'm going to say. it's important for people to pay attention to the dominant patterns of events happening around them, because at times it could be an indicator to what you might be your calling or something you'll be wired to best to. So for me, when I introspect and I reflected on the kind of my journey through university, 5 years, 2013 to 2018, when I graduated, I noticed that people always brought problems to me. And people found it comfortable to leave problems at my doorstep because they just knew somehow this guy was going to solve them. And I began to
Yeah.
say to myself, what career pathway has this flair? And I thought, consulting, isn't it? People bring problems, you help them solve it, and then you even help them implement. So that was what informed international management in my for as a second choice for my
Mm.
master's program, because I thought if I could put myself on that pedestal, maybe I should begin to think. So I wasn't boxed into my profession as a real estate professional, even though I worked in the industry. I became very um, I became very open towards possibilities, and that's it. So I came into writing, did international management, came back, lost my father the year I finished, and I was here when he passed away. So yep, I could. There's a little bit of a story between maybe we'll get there at some point with other questions. So I don't take too much time. But then I had a 1 year gap in the UK. Then I started a PhD, which was offered to me on a platter by one of the teachers who taught me in my master's program, because she kind of took a liking to me, which is something we can talk about later, maybe in one of those questions. And so that's how I got a full scholarship and finished in 2016. Got married 9 days before my Viva, which is another story. Um, which is people say today is crazy. So when I was in Lagos in 2002, 2003, sometime in October 2003, I had written down a plan, and I said by the time I'm 30, I'd like to have a PhD. I didn't know how it was going to happen. I didn't know how it was going to happen. But by the time I turned 30, I submitted my thesis. And it was when I looked back and I realized, oh, wow, this 13 years ago, kind of wrote
Yeah.
this down,
Yeah.
and 13 years later, it's come to fruition. So, yeah, and that's it. So I got finished my PhD. I got retained as a postdoctoral student, postdoctoral academic, not student,
Researcher. Yeah.
researcher. Thank you. And from there on, scaled up into becoming a lecturer, and then became the deputy director of studies. So that's kind of like the trajectory.
Wow. Wow, that's really impressive, man. That's explosive. No, it's really exciting. And lots of things to pick up from what you said. But I think the first thing that I picked up was when you said you had written jam and failed either the first or the second time. I was
Yeah.
thinking in my mind, welcome to the club.
Oh yeah, I mean, because I think failure is something people don't want to talk about. People like to talk
Yeah,
about
yeah,
glittering success, and no
yeah.
one really wants to air their dirty linen to say that I failed, and I failed, and there's nothing wrong with failing. But look at where I am today, because not Jam didn't hold me back, and Jam has no consequence, and no one will ever ask me what was your Jam score. That's a funny thing. So you
Yeah,
don't have to kill yourself for what
yeah.
really won't matter in the end.
Yeah, but I think it was pretty, like you mentioned, it was pretty important to us then that we finished
Oh yeah.
secondary school immediately and got into the
Yeah,
university.
that was the gist. Though.
I
Yeah, I
suppose
mean,
the conditioning to it as well, isn't it? Because you were not only worried for yourself, uh, there's a part of you that was worried for yourself, but you also knew your parents and their friends. There was this, the guys around the family will also be trying to find out, so you're going to university this year, right? And some of them will be asking you with that tone of, or are you not?
Yeah, yeah, you get the gist. Yeah, that's true.
Yeah, so
yeah. So I would like to just one more thing. Like there's so many things to pick up. I would like to ask you. So you mentioned a lot about you talked about your envision. You seem to be someone who has done lots of envisioning and imagination. And then you talked about the second part, which is the formative. You have to put your hands to work. And it's easy for someone to look at for anybody to look at someone like you and think Yinka is just is just a genius. How how much of how much of your success so far would you say you could attribute to, this? I imagine a lot, so that's why things have happened, or I worked hard a lot, that's why things have happened, or even like, maybe just like genetics, like you said, maybe I'm just naturally brilliant. Where How would you balance that kind of a thing?
That's a fantastic question. If I'm going to say, I mean, that's a brilliant question. First thing is to note this, that imagination, which I, engaged, was happening in a season of life where everything that was around me didn't seem to look good enough to aspire towards anything. I was living in a wire in Lagos. A wire is a slum.
Oh,
And when you live around a ghetto, it's like being in a prison because there was really no role models around. And I say this with all sense of humility and due respect to everybody that was around me. There was nobody to aspire to. Even within the family, in my family, apart from some of my family members who were doing well, but I wasn't very close to them, there was really no male role model apart from my dad,
oh,
whom I thought, was solid. But even then, I knew that, I wanted to do more. I wanted to be more. But everything around me seemed not to tell the story that I wanted. So I started creating my own future. And I
oh,
think it was the liberty to do that. I think that's one of the most powerful things I realized, that you have the power and the liberty to create your own future. And you must use that liberty and that freedom wisely. And once I was imagining and envisioning, it gave me a framework that governed my life. It gave me a framework that guided my decision making. It gave me a framework that helped me. So, whilst the envisioning bit, was critical, it was only critical to create boundaries, which is necessary in life. Because if I say, where are you heading in life? And you say, I'm going somewhere. Where somewhere? Somewhere could mean once I take a step forward, I've reached somewhere. But is that really where you're going? Otherwise, you find yourself, nowhere pretty much. But if you have a clear definition of where that somewhere is, taking one or two steps might lead you somewhere, but that's not the it. So you begin to challenge yourself to say, I need to move further because what I see in my head is not where I am now. So I've got to keep moving until I get to it, the place I saw in my head.
oh,
So that imagination was powerful enough to give me that guiding framework. That's the first thing I'll say. Second thing I'm going to say is that you've got to, so that was one. Second thing was, as that began to, so that became the software, that became the hardware, the infrastructure. It gave you that basis, so to say. The software is the handiwork of it. Looking for opportunities, and but to make the software, as it is with any computer today, you've got softwares, right? So it's not just about the works of your hand. You've got to think about things around people, resources, opportunities that come around you, that you've got to absolutely be smart enough to pick up and see it at any point in time. So I'll give you an example. The first ever scholarship I won in my life came in a season of my life where I never thought I had any potential to do anything great. So the turnaround in my academic life happened in 1995, 96. It was 96, actually, 95, 96. I was in primary six. I had been pretty much an average student up to that point. Maybe not an average student, but I wasn't first, I wasn't second, I wasn't third. I was that guy loafing around like sixth, seventh, eighth, you know, all those positions that our parents don't cherish. You get what I'm going.
so they're asking you how many
I mean,
heads does the first position have?
and but the funny thing is, you say you came eighth, and they say you've done well until they ask you how many are in your class, and you say 15, and you're like, yeah, in the middle now.
Yeah, yeah.
I was like, but the thing was, the funny thing was, even though I wasn't necessarily the topmost person in my class, I was a pretty, um, you know, influential person. And that's another lesson that I learned, that the best intellectually are not necessarily the most influential. It was a profound lesson I learned about leadership growing up, that knowing how to relate with people, and apart from your personality type, which can either draw people or repel people, but the capacity to relate and build relationships with people, was one of the paths to influence. And I realized that that influence was based not on my academic intelligence, but on my social awareness. I had a profound sense of social awareness and a deep sense of current affairs, both of which when I blended them together, whenever I spoke in class, I became like an Aristotle, amongst my peers because I was reading the newspapers and I was sounding there. But when it comes to maths and English and science and all that, I was good, but I wasn't as good as those geeky ones who knew their stuff. And I was
Yeah.
good only because my father had a tough regimen for us in terms of how we developed ourselves growing up at home. So my father was a very involved person with, to this week, you are doing chapter 15 of understanding maths. When it comes back on Sunday, he sits you down, he looks at it with you, you don't get it right, he flogs you. So we had a tight regimen. So that helped. Otherwise, I would have been a zero brain.
Yeah.
I was one of those very playful boys. Like I didn't care, but I just wanted to have fun, you see. But hey, this was what happened. So my father, in his wisdom, not knowing what was going to happen in school the following week, came home this weekend and just said, "What is your book?" And I looked at the book. So we used to go through the book. My father's principle was you buy a textbook. So primary six, understanding maths, Abi, is 24
Yeah.
chapters. Fantastic. You must do, 2 chapters per week. So that by the end of 12 weeks, which is usually a term or so, you will have done all the chapters in the book, something like that. He always had this his own logic was by the time you're hitting second term, you should have finished the book and then you should start all over again so that you ground yourself. And then by third time, you are the guru in the class. That was his philosophy.
Yeah.
I never bought it. That's the truth. But anyway, that's another story. I never bought it because I'm in my mind, I'm like, how can you be envisioning for me when I don't even want to become that guru? Yeah, the one saying I can become it. I just want to have fun. So
Yeah.
he came home one day and he just said, "What chapter are you in?" I said, "Chapter 6." He said, "Bring your book." I said, "What's in chapter 15?" I can't remember that, but this was far towards the end. I said, "Pythagoras theorem." My father said, "Do you know Pythagoras theorem?" Like, Pythagoras skinny. I don't know anything called Pythagoras. How do you want me to know Pythagoras theorem? Like, it's way above my pay grade. And he sat me down that evening and he said, "I want to teach you something." So he taught me Pythagoras theorem and he taught me and I knew it. In 30 minutes, I knew Pythagoras theorem. And he gave me exercises and I did it. So in my mind, I'm thinking, so I think he just wanted to prove to me that you don't limit yourself, young man. Like you can, if they teach you, you can know anything. And in my mind, I'm
Yeah.
like, "Meh, you know, go
Yeah.
and play game,
Yeah.
have fun."
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah. Yeah.
when I got to school that week, they said they were going to choose a group of students who were, top 20 students in maths across primary six to do an internal exam to represent the school in a state maths competition. And
Uh,
guess what the 10 questions were? Pythagoras theorem.
wow.
So I sat down in the class, filming big boy, finished the thing in 10 minutes, gave it to the teacher. And the teacher was like, "Are you sure you're finished?" I said, "I finished now." Every other person was still there. We got back into the classroom. I remember all my friends gathered and then they put the questions on the board. And then they started taking digs at it and saying, "I tried to use you know, some theory or some, maths formula." I was just looking at it and say, "Formula kini." I said, "This is Pythagoras theorem. Is it a right angle triangle? The square of the hypothesis equals the sum of the square of the other two sides." And I just solved it for them. So that's how they came back and said I was the one who won, that who came first. Let me make you laugh. When I got home and I told my father, I said, "Daddy, you can't believe what just happened though. I went to do this thing. They said I'm the sole representative of the school." My father looked at me and he said, "You better don't let yourself down because we know who you are. We are the ones that know you. They think you are good. We know you."
Okay.
Yeah.
Wow.
And that was the turnaround in my life, my academic life. From that point on, so needless to say, I went to write that scholarship exam, represented the school, and won the National Mathematics Scholarship, which was one of the
Wow.
first in 1995, 96 then. So got a full scholarship that paid um, a good chunk of my GSS 1 to 3 education. I think they were paying me like 5,000 a term or something ridiculous. Then that was a lot of money.
Yeah.
And that was my shot into, so to say, academic limelight. And since then, when I tasted that success, I never wanted to go back on it. So that was what it then helped my formative thing. So my formative side of it, even though my father had been working on it with me, in terms of helping me build diligence and honesty, it was when I had my first taste of success that I realized that I needed to keep forming things and needed to keep working. So people, opportunities, um, the imaginative bit of it to create a framework, boundaries, and that would then help you guide you through your choices.
Well, well, that's really good, man. Yeah. I mean, sorry about the loss of your father. He seems like he was really, a foundation for
Oh
you
yeah, oh
and a
yeah, yeah. He
pillar
was
for
he
you.
was a great man. He was
Wow.
a great man. Yeah.
Yeah. Martin, have you anything?
I certainly have a few. I was going to touch on your dad and his influence because I suppose it's something that, well, on a number of levels. So going back to when you talked about like an absence of role models where you grew up, those are things that on some level you can't control because you can't control where you were born. But I think it's massive credit to your dad because in the midst of whatever it was that meant he had to live there with you guys, he had he kept that forward thinking mind, which I think is very crucial because I feel and hopefully we can touch on this as we start talking about your experience in the UK. I think a lot of times what prevents people from doing very well is that lack of support or some level of guidance. Not that you want someone to handhold you for a long period of time, but every one of us needs some level of guiding, especially at the early stages. Just like you said, the turning point for you was something that he unknowingly pushed you into, and then you used that knowledge, and from there, because of the result that came out of it, you now used that as your trigger. He didn't need to push you anymore.
No.
He pushed you once, you used it, it brought a result, and you ended up pushing yourself. And I think that is missing in a lot of people. So I think, we'll touch on that a bit more on how, you used experiences like that when you first got into the UK and how you settled in, because I also think that's another thing that is really missing for people when they come in here. It's just a bit of guidance to start with so that they can start trolling through. If not, many times people come and then, you look left and okay, I think people are going left. I'll probably try and go left. And then it looks like people turn right on your way there and you think, it's kind of when you were talking about that whole not knowing where you're going, it reminded me of one book I read where someone represented it with a story of a pilot that apparently, he had his crew and passengers on board, but he did not know where they were going. He didn't know the destination. So it got to some point, and I think because of bad weather, they were just, it just kept blowing them left and right. So he made an announcement saying, I have no idea where we're going, but we're close. Because if you don't know where you're going, how do you know how close you are to it or how far away you are from it? So, I guess we're close because I have no idea where we're going. We must be close, or are we? So it's things like that. But I think that was a very good foundational point to start from. That was really good.
Yeah. Okay. Yinka, I think we'll just, now that Martin has prompted us, we'll just start talking things around the UK now. So, why did you move to the UK? Like, you've given us some, like an overview of how you've come here, but at what point did you start considering, maybe I should move to the UK? And we already have an estimate of around the time you came to the UK, but why did you come to the UK? Was it just like by chance, or is there any special reason why?
It wasn't by chance. It was deliberate. It was like most of us. It was a move. I mean, my father, schooled in Newbury, which is close to Reading. Funny enough, just a stone throw away from Reading. And he had always, told us that he would desire for us to have some kind of foreign education. And but my father had always had this whole thing of, foreign education, and he would come and tell us and so on and so forth. So it was a strategic move. In terms of whether I was going to stay over, it's probably the conversation that we can also have, because when I came in 2010, it was clear. The strategy was simple: come, do your masters, bail out, go back to Nigeria. It was simple. Why? Because one, you get a master's degree, you go back home. Two, if my father was still alive, I knew he needed me around a bit, so I knew I was going to go back home. But when he died about 2011, he died 2011, October the 1st, 2011. When he passed away, I had to take a pause and reevaluate myself and thought, all the plans I had, I was going to bail out in January. So I had come back. In fact, I left him August the 2nd. That was the last time I saw him, 2nd of August 2011. I was going to graduate in December 2011. And then my visa expires January 2011. You know the way this visa thing works now. You come for a
Yeah.
master's 1 year. I was going to leave. So my point was, go
Yeah.
back to Lagos. In fact, go back to the company where I last worked and maybe pick up my job again and just continue with life. But when
Yeah.
it passed on, I stood back and I thought, you know what, pause. And that was when the whole thing of so let me now put that point in, even though this since we're just flowing with the conversation. I
Yeah.
told
No,
you
that's fine. Go
yeah, I
ahead.
told you I took a gap year. When I took a gap year, when my father
Up here
passed,
between
so when I
what?
did my master's and started my
Uh-huh.
PhD, there was a gap year. So I finished my
Okay.
master's 2011,
Uh-huh.
September 2011. I graduated December 2011. I didn't start my PhD until uh, 2012 October. Yeah, 2012 October 2012 was when I started my PhD. So I had a year in between. So I finished my
Mm-hmm.
master's September. I didn't start until October. So what happened inside that year was that so my father had passed away, and I was, kind of reevaluating my life. Didn't know what to do, but then I was taken in. So of course, when I was in survival, I couldn't get a job. I applied for jobs. Just wasn't getting jobs. And this
Was
probably
that here in the UK or were
that was,
you
yeah,
back
that
in
was in the
Nigeria?
UK. That was here
Okay.
in the UK. No, then the wisdom was just don't rush into any decision. So stay back. So I
Yeah.
knew that there was a post-study work visa, so I applied for that. So
Okay.
I didn't want to make a haste in making a
Yeah.
decision. So, and because the person with whom I was coming to serve was gone,
Yeah.
and you know what that meant? I didn't have accommodation in Lagos anymore. If that makes sense, So that was all those things informed the speed of my decision making. So I stopped and bought myself the time I needed with a post-study work visa to say, get a post-study work visa, try and get a job in the UK, try and do some work. And even if you would then end up going, at least save some money to be able to pick up your own apartment in Lagos and
Yeah.
then rent a place and then go back home and start your life. I wasn't going to go back to Ibadan. That was a no.
Yeah.
In my mind, I'm like, I can't go back to Ibadan. It's impossible. Can't. Like, it
Yeah.
will not happen and it's impossible. So,
Yeah. Yeah.
so it will have to be Lagos or Abuja for all I cared. But
Yeah.
I knew I'd lived Abuja life firsthand. It was expensive, so I knew I had to have some money. So I came to save and get. But the thing was, inside those years, I didn't get a job, and because I didn't get a job, didn't stop me. I did something. I started serving. I didn't have a job, so I started serving. I was serving in the Bible study that was on my campus there. In fact, it was like a Christian fellowship, and the founder of the fellowship, who happened to be an elderly lady, told me, she had this feeling that I had a bit of contribution I could make to the fellowship. Story. I'm not a solid Christian. No, you can't come and put me in charge of. I cannot. I'm not a pastor. As I
Yeah.
told that, I said I'm not
Yeah.
a pastor. You know,
Yeah.
and you can't come and put responsibility of me. But
Yeah.
I told somebody, I said, you know what, I will serve. And the funny thing was, as I began to serve, it put me in a space where I began to do things I didn't know I was going to do. I was really, really into it. I was serving as best as I could. It was in the midst of my service that the opportunity to get a PhD came. It almost was like a reward from God that even though you didn't get a job and you still chose to give out your time. So I was serving in three different charities or two different charities. I was serving on campus, and there was an external charity called the Africa Christian Fellowship. Now, let me take a quick detour here. When I moved into Reading, and I needed to the values I'd created that had been instilled in me in Nigeria, and all those things I had were very fundamental to helping me stay grounded when I came into the UK. I had stories, and those stories became real around me. You had the girls, you could do anything you wanted. You had booze, you could do anything you wanted. There was internet, you could do anything you wanted. I could choose not to go to school. I could choose to sit down at home and watch movies all day. I mean, the freedom was just endless. And I didn't have that kind of freedom in Nigeria, not because my father curtailed me, but because infrastructural deficit didn't make certain things accessible to me. But here was
Yeah.
I was in a zone where everything seemed to be limitless. And I
Yeah.
had to still rethink of where are my boundaries within this limitless society. And that was
Yeah.
very tough to navigate through as a young man who was just in his early 20s, being thrown into a system that gave him everything, handed everything down to him on a platter of gold. And I had to think through it. So it was those Christian charities, Africa Christian Fellowship, for example, where I met other Nigerians who had become successful in the UK. That gave me a sense of, these men were Christians, these men were doing very well in their careers. So I began to serve with them. I drew closer to them, just see. I wasn't like 100% close to many of them, but it was just
Yeah.
being around them was good enough for me.
Yeah.
It gave me a sense of, you are in this country, you too can make it. Whatever
Yeah.
happens, you will be fine.
Yeah.
Being around, and I believe God planted me in that place for a reason. And in addition, then I started serving in the youth arm. So I began to teach their children. So I noticed something happen. So what happened used to happen to me in primary school began to happen again to me when I came to England. And what was that thing? I noticed that whenever I sit down, the the things, the responsibilities they give to me, maybe two people, those so two young people. The one on campus had three students. Inside 5 weeks, three became 10, 10 became 20, 20 became 30. People
Wow.
were just going around telling you need to hear this guy, you need to hear this guy. This guy, you can relate to this guy. This guy has gist for you. So it's that gist element that they like. This guy has gist
Yeah.
for you. So
Yeah.
it wasn't
Yeah.
like I was a it wasn't like I was a sound Bible scholar. And that's just me being honest. I wasn't, I can't for a life of me claim to convert a fly or anything. And
Yeah.
I didn't know my Bible that well. I was just getting to read the Bible better at that
Yeah.
point. So and someone say, you need to listen to this guy, you need to listen. And people were tired of Bible bashers. So I think bringing in that element of my knowledge of the Bible, which was important, of course, and the blending it with practical real life thing made such a huge difference. And before I knew it, the campus then became over 100 students, and the one that I was doing in town became over 50, 60 children, young people,
Wow.
out of whom 80% of people in attendance didn't even have their parents being members of the fellowship.
Wow.
So these guys were going into their schools and telling their friends that they knew in school, there's a place I go to on Sunday, you need to come. So my
Yeah.
Sunday evening suddenly became, they gave us this small room. Suddenly became a room where I would go in and I would see like 40 heads of young people waiting to
Oh.
listen to me share something with them for 2 hours.
Yeah.
It was inside those periods of service that I really understood purpose about my purpose in life. And I said something to myself then, if God would want me to stay back in the UK, he will make a way for it. So I wasn't fussy.
Yeah.
And so I remember I took a break from, preparing my materials for a Tuesday sermon, if you permit me to use the word sermon. I was
Yeah.
preparing a sermon and I took a break from the library. So remember, I was living with the family who took me in. So a family, a pastor and his wife with their two children. I was living in one room with their two children. So we're three in the room. They took me in and they were feeding me and they were, helping me. The husband was doing his PhD, so I would come with him to campus and I would go back home with him in the evening, or I would usually just take a bus home myself. So
Are these people related to you in any way?
no, I met them in that ACF, the Africa Christian Fellowship. So
Oh,
that's
wow.
another blessing. When I got in there, as I was serving, service created platforms. You see, when you serve, and this is a powerful weapon, most foreigners, Nigerians tend to have this or do it without knowing. When you find yourself in a foreign land, always look for a platform to serve. It is through service that you get the biggest opportunities that could change your life. Things come to you easier through service because service is a show of commitment. You're paying it forward. People will see that and they'll respond to it. So, of course, because I was a visible face, I wasn't a stranger. So when the
Yeah.
need arose, and I walked up to this family and I said, I didn't even have to say it. They knew the day. In fact, the day my father died, my brother called me. I was walking on the road. Then I broke down on the road. I started crying. So I sat on the edge of the road and I was crying. It was this couple that was driving by and saw me, and they came to pick me up, and they drove me to my pastor's house, and they comforted me and they prayed with me. And then they said, "So what's going to happen next?" I said, "I don't know. My school accommodation runs out next week. I don't know what I'm going to do. But one thing I know is I cannot be homeless." That much I knew. I didn't
Yeah.
know where I was going to go. So if worst case scenario, I was going to go back to my uncle who lives in Kent. But I knew I wasn't going to stay homeless. So they said, coming with us. And that's how they took me in. So it wasn't even anything that I had to beg for. They willingly
Mm.
opened their doors to me. And so that was a whole story of, whether staying in the UK was planned. It wasn't really planned. It was just that as I served, I took that break of the library, went into the university to Henley Business School to just walk around. I was just taking a stroll around. And
Yeah.
I saw this woman. She walked up to me and she said, you are Adeyinka. She hugged me. She said, I remember your master's days. You're one of my good students. You used to sit in front. When others were making noise at the back. This was when I knew that also people watch you when you don't know they're watching you.
Yeah.
When I came in, I was the only black student, or there were two black students in my cohort. But when it came to my own class, I was the only black student. But when I walked into some of the classes, I used to sit in front, not because I was an EFICO type thing, but because in my head, I knew, see, someone paid for me to come here, and I cannot waste this 1 year of my life. Others were white. They will sit at the back. They'll be making fun. They'll be
Yeah.
gisting. They'll be laughing. They go to the pub after and go and drink snake bite. I used to say to myself, you better be wise. If they live here, there's a job waiting for them.
Yeah.
If you go and start drinking beer with them and
Nothing
you
for
don't
you.
face your academics, nothing for
Yeah.
you. So
Yeah.
apparently, my teachers used to see that this guy used to sit in front. That was serious. So that woman was one that came to me and said, "What are your plans?" You know what came out of my mouth? I said, "I don't know. I just, I'm thinking of a further education." I said, "Do you want to do a PhD?" Flashback to what I wrote some years back, and I said, "Of course, yeah. I've always said I wanted to do a PhD, but I never knew whether that was going to happen. I didn't know it was going to be an opportunity." She said, "This is your opportunity. Send me your proposal." Send a proposal. They gave me a full scholarship. That scholarship was worth tens of thousands of pounds. I mean,
Wow.
north of 70,000 pounds, so to say,
Wow.
that I was given. And it paid so it means I didn't have to work anymore. So it was paying me a stipend of £1,250 every month.
Wow.
And it paid off all my tuition and everything I needed, and also even took care of my foreign travels when I needed to make foreign travels. So
Wow.
it was a very profound thing, and that was how I got the scholarship. So that was how I kind of stayed back in the system. So it wasn't like I had come with a preset mind of once you enter JAND, oh boy, don't look
Not
Nigeria
going
face
back.
again, no.
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow. Wow. That's really impressive, man.
I was going to ask something,
Yeah.
Yinka, around what you mentioned about those temptations, access to the internet,
Oh yeah.
access to, if you want to have a good time, especially depending on where you're coming from in Nigeria, you come in here, it's an entirely different beast,
Yes, sir.
right? So I think one of the things you mentioned was having or somehow getting access to people that you used to calm you down and not get not lose yourself in that mentality.
Mm.
But that is a big problem for people when they come here. And I'm sure because from some of my conversations with Nonso, who we know mutually, I think it's something that you do consciously when people come to Reading or to Henley, where you're very much involved. You've taken it as a responsibility to prevent people from just going haywire and into. But for those that don't have access to you, what are some of the practical steps you would suggest for people? Because like many things, for some it's not intentional.
Yeah.
They come here and it's 1 year, and 1 year doesn't seem like a very small time to them. So they start by thinking, my first month, I'll just give you a month and have a good time. And then 1 month becomes 2, and then it becomes
Yeah.
4 and 6, and then you're now writing your dissertation and nothing has happened.
Yeah.
So just to get a feel of what are some of the things you would use this platform to encourage people to do or to take note of, to just make sure they don't get lost in that abundance of so many distractions.
Yeah, thanks for that, Martin. I mean, it always comes back to the whole thing. What's your mission here? What have you come to do? So there are two things. You can give me a simple answer and say, well, I'm here to get a master's degree, or I'm here to get a degree. And I'll say, of course. I mean, of course, that's the end result. But you could give me a more comprehensive answer, and this is the difference. This is where the difference lies between the choices, between how the vision you have in your mind informs the choices you make. If you tell me that you're here to just get a degree and to go, you can gyrate and go and chop life. You can rigmarole your way through, and you still get that degree at the end of it. In fact, you can have fun with all the girls. You can drink beer. You force feed yourself. Try and do one or two courses here and there. Fail some, receipt some. sha pass. In fact, you may not even receipt. You may just be that good, that talented academically to still pull through without any receipt and still finish with a nice merit or even a distinction. For all I care, you can do that. And you get your certificate and you're done. But if you flip the script around and ask yourself and give yourself a deeper, answer. When I came into the UK, when I was about 25 years old. First, in my mind, I was no longer a young person. Time has gone. When I got into the UK, my first shock, is I seeing people 18 by 21. 2021, they have their BSc. I had my BSc at 25. The difference was clear. They already had a 5-year head start in terms of building the things that made life happen. This is another conversation for another day.
Yeah.
Literally, I didn't start building my life until I turned 31 because I was in school till 31.
Yeah.
So my friends who were my mates had spent 10 years at work and had become senior managers. I was just finishing school. Let's not go there. We can always talk about how that could drive people crazy.
We can really go very, very far if we drift off from there now. But let's stay on track.
Let's stay on track. So I was already 25. So it began to say to myself, it was that point that hunger came inside of me. What's my purpose in life? So I knew that coming to the UK was beyond a degree. If my first class was good enough to tell me I would get a degree, and I came out with a distinction. So it wasn't like I was there. I knew I was going to do well. I had no doubt about that. But I was saying to myself, oh boy, you can't just come collect this pali and go. What will you say to yourself was the added value beyond being educated? And I knew that exposure was one thing. Definitely, I can't take anything away from that. The fact that I became exposed to a new system, learned how new things work. But I began to say to myself, there's more, there's more, there's more. It was that thing of there is more that kept me in check. Because anytime I wanted to do something stupid, and I did do a few silly things, but I wasn't a wild person because, like I said, my values were already grounded. So the last thing that was going to happen to me was to come here and go haywire. And if I wanted to go haywire, like I said, remember, the person who could put me in line had died.
Yeah.
So, my mom wouldn't call me and be saying, are you drinking? Are you smoking? Are you, womanizing? All that wasn't going to happen. So there was nobody that was going to put me on the check. The only person that put the check on me was me. And so that vision of, that desire of, oh boy, there's more. And there was one thing I feared. And this is something that I would gladly submit. And it was a question that came into my heart when I was in that slum or ghetto area, when I was still young and growing. And it was said, the question came as this. It was after a time of meditation. The question came as this. It said, if you knew you become the prime minister of a country in the next 20 years, how would you start living your life differently from today? That question came from the inside of me. I nearly fell off my chair. And I knew it was inspired by God. Because I started saying to myself, oh boy, see question. If I will become the prime minister of a country in 20 years, vision, how will you start living your life different? So when I came, I began to say to myself, oh boy, if you will become a successful person in the UK, is it that when you become head of something, you will start hiring people to go and clean up your mess? Because there was one girl somewhere that you did something to, or something you did somewhere, or something. So I began to say to myself, I cannot afford to live a life where I would create a mess that could pull me down 20 years down the line. I had read too much about men who rose to the top only for the things they did in their youth to be their downfall. So I began to say, is this the kind of life I want for myself? So I began to chat. So a blend of all those things forced me to create a leash around my own neck. Now, this is not to say you don't make mistakes. And I'm saying this because people might think maybe I became so holy and then I didn't. You make mistakes, but you will not make costly mistakes. At least that thing will keep you from making very expensive mistakes. What you don't want to make are the costly mistakes. Even if you make costly mistakes, you must quickly retrace your steps and get back on track. For me, what I noticed in this country was the power of the mission drift was so powerful in this country. This context has the power to drift you off your mission. In fact, the system is wired in a way that you can experience mission drift without knowing you've gone adrift. It's so easy. It's like the story of that proverbial boat. You park the boat in a bay, at what was meant to be the edge of the landing area, but you didn't tie it with a rope. You didn't anchor yourself. Anchor. A vision anchors. You didn't anchor yourself. And you say, the boat will be okay. The next morning you woke up, you didn't know. And you know it wasn't a storm. You only can see the boat far off, miles away. Why? It drifted. And you know, the process of drift is subtle. So when I noticed that it was easy in this country, in this context, to come in, once you fall into the power of association, once you get into the wrong hands, you are a goner. That's the first thing I'm going to say. Association. Association. You see, I would rather prefer you stay lonely than for you to get into the wrong company. You will emerge better if you don't get into the wrong company than if you got into a wrong company and they took you totally adrift. Because it is
you know, there is this thing where sorry to cut in.
No, go on.
Just within what you're talking about, you know, when you come here, there is also this, so contrasting, putting it side by side, there is, you know, you can be, you know, just retain your values and, you know, not drift like you've used it. And then you also contrast it with, I've come to a new place, you know, I need to mingle, I need to belong, I need to be among, you know. These two things seem to sometimes, I'm not sure if they contradict, but what could you say about them? Because if you look at them and they look like, should I be trying to, you know, especially people from different cultures and backgrounds, you're like, maybe I can be a little more like these people so I can flow more with them, or should I, you know, stay? How would you balance this kind of a thing?
So there was a principle my mentor taught me that I never forget. He said, fellowship is commanded, relationship is a choice. You never forget that. Fellowship is commanded. When you come into a context, fellowship is required. Make yourself known. Be visible. Build acquaintances. But to have a deeper relationship with those people is a deliberate choice you have to make. So I always say things to people. I've always been a very sociable and friendly person with very few friends. I walk into any environment, I light the place up. I laugh, I joke, I meet people, I gist, I connect, make fun. But when it comes to whether you and I are going to be the person I'm calling 8 a.m. in the morning, 9 a.m. in the morning, I don't let people into my space that easily. So I knew how to create this onion ring around me. I had my circle of influence. And that circle of influence, at the core of it, was maybe 1 or 2 people max. Those are my guys. And then the guys on the outer, and then the guys on the outer, and the guys, even Jesus practiced this principle. There was those 3 that he had that were close to him, Peter, James, and John. Those ones were the ones that were his body. And then there were other disciples that were on the outer ring. And in fact, he had more than 12 disciples, as we all know. But we always talk about these 12. But even amongst the 12, there was category. You know, so when he was going to Gethsemane at the point of his greatest pain and suffering, he went with only those closest bodies. That's why the guy was pained when he said, you guys are supposed to be praying for me. And I told you guys were my guys. And God, sorry, you know, body don't weak. You know. So there was that onion that was like, so what I would say to people is that I'm not saying, you know, because of vision, then you close yourself. No. Be friendly with people, but be careful who you let into your space. Be very careful who you let into your space. Number one. Number 2, practice this principle of when you are moving with people, open your eyes, listen, pick things from them. You know, when I hear people say things, I begin to understand their value system. I start to ask questions. I begin to understand your vision. If our vision doesn't align, it doesn't mean I throw you under the bus. It just means I keep you at a distance, because you can still be useful in my life journey, but maybe not in the space in which I think you might be useful. So those were things I did. So when I walked into the Africa Christian Fellowship, for example, one thing I said was that these guys were a lot older than I am. They still are a lot older than I am. And I began to say, no, there's no representation of my kind of people here. You know, that was the first thing. But I began to realize that, hey, but come on, these guys, I mean, head of physiotherapy, physics, Royal Berkshire Hospital, head of something, something, somewhere, head of something, something, even the ones that were not head of something somewhere, these are people who have battle scars to show. The best thing is to learn from the experiences of others. I don't have to make the same mistakes this guy has made. So I began to learn and began to listen and began to watch and began to observe. And those things really helped me stay on course with the mission, that I set. Apart from the fact that the creator path for me to pursue my purpose. So I would say to people, be sociable. But when it comes to picking your friends, you choose those ones with your eyes wide open.
That's very good. That's brilliant, man. Martin, anything to mention before I?
No, nothing else. Nothing else to add from this topic. I'm a bit conscious to not, some of the things you said. As you were saying, and we could all tell if we start diving into some of them.
Man,
we'll be here till this time next week. But I think and we'll try and keep this one short. Please, it's still more of a question. Still based on those distractions that people face when they come here, and some people succumb to not intentionally.
Oh yeah.
When people are leaving Nigeria or wherever they are leaving, coming to a place like this, in your case, slightly different because you were already 24, 25. But when you have people coming here right after secondary school, so they are, just past 16, 17, 18, and are still going to be exposed to that level of distraction. So more or less, you're having to grow up fast if you don't, if you're not careful. Do you feel, whether parents, whether guardians, at the moment, do you feel they are talking or having conversations enough, especially with people that age before they move here, to try and prevent them from getting into that trouble? Because it's different when you're 24 and it's different when you're 16. Honestly, coming here at the age of 16 to be thrown into, and obviously with technology going where it's gone of recent, the distractions are just a lot more. So I just want to get your thoughts on whether you feel, well, first of all, whether you feel it is that much of a challenge, especially someone coming in here at 16 or 17, and whether or not, our guardians and parents, you feel those conversations are being had before people step into this place, just to kind of keep them grounded before they fall into some of those distractions.
It is. It's a big issue. So one of the things one of the things that I do informally is, I hear of parents who are bringing their children into Reading. They check who is the Nigerian lecturer that is there, or someone speaks on and says, there's this Adeyinka guy somewhere, and then I just get this call out of the blue saying, my daughter is coming. Please help me watch over my daughter. Help me look after my daughter, and so on and so forth. So I get all that request a lot. Unfortunately, I'm not the kind of guy who will police them, because I notice that these guys don't need another parent in their life. They need a body. And I can't be a guy who will be policing them. Say, did you go to the club yesterday? Did you? I can't do that. So I always say to parents that if you are bold enough to release your child into this context, you have to be confident enough that you've handed them the values that will keep them safe. They will make mistakes, but at least they will not go too far off. That's one thing. The other thing is, you must always also remember that these guys, the kind of education they have is different from the ones we had. And these guys are already exposed to this world in some sense, even in Nigeria these days. I mean, many of these guys are, internet, there's all these things already there for them. And the only thing is that there's a curtailed level of freedom, maybe with weed, for example, now, because that's one of the things I deal with when I see these guys come and start to smoke weed, or start to booze a lot, those ones, maybe they don't have access. It's there, but, that one is a bit controlled. But when they come here, you can go on the street and find one guy, give him 20 quid. He gives you a nice pouch of weed. You start smoking. You're good. So those ones are there. Now, our parents having this conversation, I noticed that a lot of parents, many parents, that at least many of the ones I've spoken to, always have that fear that they haven't done enough to give these children what they need to survive the system. In fact, many of them don't even think that they understand that the system has its, challenges and its issues, but they still feel like I don't know if I've done enough for this guy. Remember, some of them are coming from boarding school where parents have not even had a lot of influence on them
Exactly.
that
Yeah.
much,
Yeah.
So it becomes a big challenge. In terms of how these guys navigate it, is maybe working with people like myself that they can relate with,
Hmm.
that helps many of them through. Some of them, again, in all fairness, some of these guys demonstrate some high level of maturity as well. You grow up quicker these days. The maturity of a 16-year-old of our time compared to 16-year-old of this era is
Yeah.
two different things. They've seen a
Yeah.
bit more in life than we have seen in some
Yeah.
ways. So you tend to get that flair that some of them just are, um, you know, more, they're they've seen things, they've experienced things, and so they already exposed to the challenges already. So when they come here, it's just it may be 1 or 2 years higher than what they've seen in Nigeria or wherever country they've come from. And in dealing with it, many of them deal with it successfully, and I can't take that away from them. They learn through their mistakes and grow through their mistakes. We cannot, curtail them from doing that. From We cannot take that away from them, but that's where my role comes in. So when I was running Bible study on campus, I realized that I became that big brother to many people in that space. I became that hand, thrown behind their back, saying,
Hmm.
"You messed up, but I got you." I get
Hmm.
calls all times of the night, the person crying at the end of the phone. "Yeah, I've just done it again. Okay, what did you do?" They tell me, "Okay, no problems. When can we talk? Let's talk. Let's meet up." And then we walk through things. So, so it became that, I became like that to many of these young people.
Hmm.
And it really helps. So, association would be key. Um, People who you relate to, either your peers or, and I also let me also say this. I see a lot of peer-to-peer relationships that are so solid and so robust.
Hmm.
You find the right pairs to roll with, it could just be
Yeah.
your saving grace as well. Because there are some guys you see, let's not forget, this 1% of Nigerian youth that have access to study abroad, not all of them are from the high social class categories. Many of them are from
No.
the mid and lower middle class level. So some of these guys are coming with the mentality of your father sold palm wine to send
Yeah.
you down here, or your father, hustled or is hustling to send you
Yeah.
down here. So there's that thing of you cannot,
Mess up. Yeah.
so all that also comes into play. So I can't take
Hmm.
anything away from those young guys saying that, oh, they come here and they just, mess up. No, many of them come here and still do exceedingly well
Yeah.
due to a blend of factors.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. No, thanks for covering that. Yeah. No, back to you, Azim. As you're talking, I'm having to make note of 1 or 2 things that we can catch up with, either if we still have time or offline. But yeah, no, I'm very, very
Yeah.
happy with that.
Martin, like you said, I'm even the reason I'm not asking as many questions is I just see so many different directions that this conversation can go. Like, and we can keep talking, like you said, till tomorrow. But we just keep. I mean, there's nothing wrong in having Yinka on again, just to talk about something different. But just moving on, Yinka, you've definitely been a success in all like through your life, and especially in the UK here, both academically and just the amazing things you've just been telling us. I found out a few things about you, but I just never thought you were doing things on this scale, and they're just really, really, really impressive. But having achieved all this, can I ask you, what is the one thing, or even if it's not just one, what are the things that you could look back and think, man, I probably shouldn't have done this, or I could have done this better, or I could have done this differently. It comes in form of maybe regret or something. What are there things like that for you that you think I could have done this differently, knowing what you know now?
Yeah, I could have taken more risks. I could have taken more risks. I mean, like you said, it's good to, you can say, oh yeah, based on the impact you've had and so on. I laugh and I say, well, we thank God for those things, but maybe it could have been more. Maybe I could have done more. I could have, for instance, I'm just about to build. I've been doing a lot of work, coaching, consultancies, trainings, and I still don't have a company, so I'm just trying to build. I'm just registering a company and just build. It's not like there's anything wrong with that, But I could have done that a lot earlier.
Yeah.
I could have, if I had put structure to the things that many people pull me around to come do, like this speaking engagement could have easily gone under my public or external engagement section on my website and all those things that, putting
Yeah.
structure around all my activities. If there was something I could have done better, is that I could have put structure around myself a lot better. And that could have given me the license to do more and to chase bigger things that could have resulted into bigger impacts. And so I held back significantly when I should have let myself go to actually build things. It's not like it's a regret, but if I look back, it's something I think I should have done. That's something I should have strategized a little bit differently. I could have given myself I could have built a platform for myself much earlier, and that could have given me more visibility. Maybe one of the things that scared me was that I didn't want to be seen as this shallow, superficial guy who, is out in social media, having this huge following and blah, 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 blah. And the funny thing was, I noticed that a lot of guys who are having those large followings don't have much to tell the people that are following them.
Yeah.
But then I said to myself that I don't want to, all that stuff is, and no disrespect to anybody who is, having a huge following on social media. I'm not envious of not having of people who have huge following. I mean, that's not my cup of tea. Like, I have social media, I have Instagram, I have Facebook, I have Twitter. I'm not actively seeking followers, so to say. I believe at some point the following will come, maybe when people see value at some point. But maybe if I had been a bit more deliberate in putting structure, maybe I could have built more things. And second thing I could have done differently was, maybe I could have also there were some relationships that came around my space that I think I could have leveraged a little differently. And that was only because there was a limit to my emotional intelligence as much as there was a limit to my strategic wisdom or strategic insights. And looking back now, the more I'm older now, I begin to look at relationships in my life and begin to be a bit more careful to say, these are strategic relationships. You need to leverage these a little different or a little better.
Yeah. I think you're absolutely right. But on the first point that you made, it's something that resonates within me. So I'd like to ask like one question or just talk about it. So you mentioned that when you compared that people on social media, they've got large followings, and sometimes when you bring your microscope very close, you almost see empty, you just see void, or at least you don't think they have that much they're offering. Some of them have, some of them just don't. And for someone like you, I think there'll be this. You almost mentioned it. There could be this kind of imposter syndrome because you've studied, you are aware, and I think that the more someone like you is, the more you are aware. It's awareness. You are aware of what you know, but you're also roughly aware of how much you don't know, and then that kind of makes you, kind of, well, I'm not sure I'm ready to be out there. But again, when is anybody ever like you ever going to be ready? So I don't know if you've thought about this or if you have anything to share about it. So this is, on one hand, I've just heard, okay, for instance, you just listen and you just hear one philosopher or some name you've never heard before, you've never read this person's work, you're thinking, man, there's just so much I don't know. I'm not ready to be out there. On the other hand, the people who are out there, who are even probably making impacts, let's not take it away from them in some ways, they don't know like half of what you know. So when are you ready? And when do you, like, what was that?
That's why I said earlier that, my mistake is when I said I could have done things differently. I'm not saying that I could have gained more followers. Maybe I could have been more strategic and deliberate and maybe even more consistent. So I have two things I put up on SoundCloud: Substance for Men and Substance for Women, which are self-affirmation things I created and put out there. I could have been more focused on. I could have been more consistent. I have a vlog on YouTube called Introspection on my page on YouTube. I think I have 12 episodes on there. I could have been more consistent, with those things. I've not been. So it comes back to what you said earlier. with the question you're asking me, and I keep saying to myself that now that I'm, at this stage, I'm beginning to now take back those opportunities and say, you know what, better late than never. I haven't done anything wrong. If anything at all, maybe I've just grown deeper roots and I have maybe more to offer now. So maybe I can then start to now deliberately look for the platforms and the opportunities to pull those things out there. So I do a lot of work now, and that's why I'm, building my own outfit now, trying to put a bit more structure to things, putting structure to it just to make it look legit, formal, and just
Yeah.
putting things out there. But yeah, I mean, it's better late than never. And like you said, um, the the key word is leverage. How some people they only know tiny, but the way they leverage tiny, you think they
Yeah.
know everything. That's it.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
it. You don't take anything away from them. They've only
Yeah.
mastered something you don't know. And so
Yeah.
that's why I said to myself, for me, it's not about how much you know, but how well you use what you know, or how
True.
well you use who you know.
Hmm.
And
True.
it's about that quality that really matters. And second thing I was going to say is that influence is the currency of the season. Everybody is an influencer in one
Yeah.
way or the other. You cannot
Yeah.
take that away from anybody. So, if you're an influencer, what are you doing with the little influence that you've got? Even if it's just a group of 500, 1,000 people following you
Yeah.
on social media or whatever it is that you say you have the influence. So right now, if you go on my social media page, you probably see that most of the things, apart from my private life, when I put one odd picture of myself here and there, you know, is all about maybe my speaking engagements or something I'm doing, maybe the Africa Fashion Week London, that I'm doing stuff with them recently, or I'm doing stuff with school teachers in Nigeria, or I'm pulling stuff with social innovators that I'll be doing later next month. All those things, are the things I'm throwing out there. But maybe I need to put a bit more structure and do things a little different. But now I've known that, I'm not, I just need to just keep doing my thing, really,
Yeah.
and without necessarily playing to the gallery.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I was going to
That's
follow up with a question. Sorry to cut you off there, Ozim.
no fine, Martin. Go on.
But the question I was going to ask, and it's actually one of the questions in the list, but it ties very strongly with the last question Obina asked, and in fact the last statement you made. One of the things you just said as you concluded was, "Now I've known."
Mm,
So the question I want to ask is, and some of the points you raised as well were things that you were not wrong in not doing them, but you can see how you would have, or you likely would have been in a stronger position if you did them early.
exactly. Yeah.
So my question now is, what are some of the things that you wish someone told you, right from the time you came in here? Things that you look back on now and you think, if I knew, if I just had this nugget of information from the time I moved in here, I would be gone.
It's a very powerful question. I think if someone had told me that when you have people, when you when you have built legitimacy with people, learn to build upon that legitimacy by continually offering value in a way that makes them lifetime subscribers, so to say, to your person.
Hmm.
That may have really been a useful thing to say. And I'm saying this because, just when I turned 30, I did something funny. So on my 30th birthday, which was the month I submitted my thesis, my PhD thesis, I it was April 29th, I think 2015 or so. I was thinking back, I think the March, 1st of March, end of March. I was thinking, you know what? I'm going to be 30 next month. So what do I want to do? I want to, bring people to Cosmos and let's go and eat. Or do I want to do something interesting? So, you know what? I'm going to do an event and I'm going to call the event a night of inspiration. So I, called a hotel up and booked a hotel venue right in Reading Town Center, Penta Hotel, and put word out there that, I needed just a maximum of 100 people, students, friends, to come and just spend the day with me in an evening of inspiration. The reason why I'm saying was, the pictures came back on my phone a few weeks ago, and on my birthday, 30th birthday, I had a night of inspiration. I told the hotel I was going to have just about 60 people. Story. 150 people showed up. At least
Wow.
150 people. 100.
150 people in the UK, that's big.
About 100 or 150 people showed. The room was packed full.
Wow.
Bam, bam, bam. And people came to, and I gave a talk that day. I would never forget that talk because there's a young man who is in Dubai today who keeps making reference to that talk. I call it Trends on Path, and how you connect the dots in the events of your life to make sense of the situations of your life. That's another story for another day. I came up with that concept and I drew it out and I gave a presentation that really challenged people. Now, where am I going? Right now, can I command 150 people to come sit in a room with me? I doubt it. It's not that it's bad, don't get me wrong. It's not that I've lost my standing. No, far from it. I mean, those guys have moved on. They've since moved on. Everyone has found their levels in life, and we all talk. But maybe if I had done something more, and that was one of the things that pushed me to write my book, The Parable of the Baker. So it's not like I'm not making progress. It's just that I've been slow and I've been too cautious. That's why I said take more risk. If someone had pushed me to say, dude, you're young, there is nothing that can stop you. Just liberty to take the risk. Take the risk. If I had someone to push me, if I had my mentors, I had mentors, don't get me wrong, and my mentors have done a fantastic job in grounding me, don't get me wrong. But if I had someone who gave me the liberty, and that's one of my best friends, Tayo, has been doing for me, is he's been the one pushing me and giving me a bit of, to say, guy, do it, go for it. But if I had started 10 years ago and gone for it, it would have been a totally different story in some sense. But do I regret not doing it? No, I don't, because you grow, you learn and grow, and it's better late than never. And why I'm speaking confidently. Speaking confidently because I know what my future looks like. So not doing things back then will still not stop where I'm going. So that's the thing. That's the power of vision. I know that things will still come together. And I also know that even though I've missed opportunities, God has the power to restore opportunities. And there's another powerful lesson I've learned in my life. That missed opportunities don't mean that that opportunity may have gone, but God always brings about second times and third times and fourth chance and fifth chance, and you always have the opportunities. But when those opportunities come again, don't let them go. And so that's why, that season where opportunities I've lost are coming back to me, and boy, I'm going to ride on them. Good. So that's why I even agreed to do this in the first place. It was one of those reasons why I agreed to speak with you guys, sharing the story. It's part of the reason why I've agreed to do it, to do this.
That's brilliant, man. I think just listening to you, I think, Yinka, one thing that is very obvious is that you are an ambitious person.
No doubt.
No doubt, man. Because when you just like casually throw out a statement like you are too slow, I think he used something like that. That's like the most intimidating thing I've heard this afternoon, because I think many people look at you and look at where you are, and then listen to you say you are moving too slow. Man, sorry, but that's intimidating. I don't want to say it's unfair, but that's intimidating. And also, I also think that you're right. You haven't. Just in case it helps you, I think there is this period where there's a kind of a cultivating season. There's a season you're building, who you are. If we had this conversation with you 3 years ago, you were a different person. So I think all those years, even though you can look at things and like, okay, I should have taken this opportunity, but I also think it was just preparation, for now. And now is even preparation for tomorrow, and it goes on. I think that Martin, were you going to say something?
No. I was kind of laughing at the statement you made about the whole being too slow. In my head, I was thinking, there's someone he would say that to now, and the person will reassess where he is and start to take it very personal because he would think he's just making fun of his
Oh, yeah.
I actually, I'm not even sure if it's safe that we should let that, should let anybody
No,
hear that.
please,
Yinka, Yinka said that it's way too slow.
don't put that out there because I think it can be misconstrued.
No.
But if people
No,
can
that's
understand,
that's definitely going out there. No, that's inspiring.
if people
It's a
can
little, but
realize
it's
that,
inspiring.
if people can realize that I made that statement with two things in mind: one,
Okay.
vision; two, potential, who you can become but haven't yet become.
Yeah.
Then it will make sense. And thirdly, is that you can never rest on your oars. So if people
Yeah.
are calling me successful, and I'm here laughing and I'm saying, like,
Yeah.
these guys have no idea that, yes, I mean, I'm not saying, and I'm really thankful to God. Yes, I mean, to some extent, I've been successful. I mean, this, you can't achieve these things and not say that you've attained some measure of success. I mean, this morning, I was I was listening into an online service, and one guy wrote there, and my mentor was teaching. I was talking about going for the future, speaking things you want to say. And one guy said, "I will get my PhD by the time I'm 35." Another said, "I'll get my PhD by the time I'm 50." And I'm there, and I looked at the comment, I'm like, "Oh, blimey." I mean, like, I've been there, done that, but it wasn't pride. But in my mind, I'm thinking, yeah.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
you see how things just vary like
Yeah.
that, you see.
Yeah.
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 So we just need to be careful when we're and put a lot of more context around things we say so that
Yeah.
people don't take them too personal. What I'm saying is that I'm not
No,
going to rest on
you
my
can,
oars.
really, so sorry,
Yeah,
really,
no, no, yeah.
we're joking. That was a joke. Like, I
No,
was just,
so I mean, I know you were joking. I absolutely get
I
it.
was
And
just exaggerating that.
even if it was serious, which I think
Yeah.
that is not out of place, because some people can listen to it and interpret it exactly the way you just interpreted it.
Mm.
It's important
Yeah.
to bring this balance to it, that
Okay.
it's
Yeah.
more about speaking to things only because I have a clear sense of vision, destiny, and also a clear sense of potential, who I can become but haven't yet become.
Mm.
Yeah.
And I could have impacted more lives as of today if I had done things. So when I said I was too slow, I still put it out there. I have been too slow. I could have helped more people. Period.
Yeah.
Mm.
I
Yeah.
could have
Yeah.
done more. Period.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
no
Yeah.
apologies about saying things that way. I could have
Yeah.
done more.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. No, I agree. I don't see any reason why, well, like you said, very often you can't control how people interpret stuff, even when you have the best intentions. But I think the key thing is for people to also understand, regardless of where they are, our routes to different destinations, will go differently.
Yeah.
So someone might have been steadily improving, and kind of maintaining the same levels of growth year in, year out, while some might have, say, a first couple of years go pretty slowly and then they suddenly burst through, because you hear some of the stories of these very well-renowned entrepreneurs we know today, and not all of them started very early. I'm trying to remember. I think the one that comes to mind is Ralph
Colonel
Lauren.
Sanders. Oh, yeah, okay.
Ralph
Yeah.
Lauren.
Sanders as well. Yeah.
Yeah. So,
KFC.
but some of them, you hear where they are now, and the last thing that would come to your mind is that, actually they didn't really hit any breakthrough until they were maybe in their 30s or something like that. I can't remember his own age, but I know there are just a few of them that, depend if you met them 2 years before their breakthrough, you'll probably be thinking, you're not exactly doing very well here, are you? So
Yeah.
our growth rates will always be different. So I think it's just key for people to understand that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. No, that was a very wonderful one. Thanks for that. Just on it's not like on a lighter note. It's something that could be funny, but something that is also very serious. From your own experience, what are the big misconceptions that people have about, you know, moving over to the UK, living in the UK, that you've realized, like, like just like a random guy in Nigeria thinking, I want to move in the UK. What are the possible, the very common misconceptions people like this could have? And
Yinka
always.
has such a smile on his face. It seems like he's heard some kind.
Ah, I've had all sorts of hypotheses.
Okay.
I think what was it? Who was I writing for? I was writing for someone recently. Maybe this year, last year, and I was, the same question came up, and I said to people that, believe it or not, there are many people who live in Nigeria today who still think that when you move into the UK, your life will just become automatically upgraded. And they're right to an extent. They're right, perhaps because the quality of life on the average could be better off when you move here. So I get it. But when you begin to go deep into the analysis of it, you realize that, for instance, a guy in Nigeria who is your mate bootstraps his way to build himself a house. You, his mate, on a mortgage. Who is better off, the guy who has equity, or you, that if your financial circumstances change tomorrow, they can throw you out of the house and you go back to ground zero? Who is on a better pedestal overall? This is not to take anything away from a mortgage system, but that whole feeling of the grass is greener on the other side is something that I really think I wish people could be a bit more realistic about. And I'm not saying that there is no advantage to coming or moving over to the UK. There are many advantages to coming over to the UK or coming to live abroad. But that whole misconception of you pick money on the streets, once you come, everything just falls into place. I can raise my children, give them the best of education. It's foul. Now, I know I have friends that if I make this comment, they immediately counter me and say, "Yeah, but the public school here is still better than an average private school in many parts of Nigeria." So, to which I say, fine, but the sets of challenges are different.
Yeah.
And you need to be aware of those challenges and be ready to parent your children through the challenge. What I'll just say is this: that people don't understand. Every context has its own nuances, and it comes with its own peculiarities in such strange ways that if you're not in touch with those nuances and peculiarities, it could be your undoing in the long run. So, for instance, I take myself as an example. My wife and I are both working, full time, so to say. We have a 16-month-old baby. We have a vision for her future. We have a desire for where we want to see her. But if you look at the way we are working in this context, and it's not at times not any different from the way people are working back home in Nigeria as well. If you look at the way you're working in this context and look at the nature of the challenges that girl is facing or she will face in Nigeria, you might still have an uncle and auntie that you still play around with that comes and talks to you and you still have mentors, and then you go to church, or you still have those big uncles and aunties. But here, that girl may not have those uncles and aunties around her like she would in Nigeria. And you are daddy and mommy working all day long, but your child is facing challenges. I mean, she's facing racial issues, she's facing bullying issues, she's facing this. How will you deal with those things, for example? So I think for me, the most important, or the most powerful assumption people have is that life is necessarily better here, and to which I say it's not always the case. Life is not always better here. Then it now takes me back to one thing that I think is the common denominator for everything. You must understand why you are in a place at any point in time, and that why is what will really galvanize how you do things. And I saw one of the questions you asked me was, what advice should I give to someone who plans to, move to the UK or move abroad? I always say something to people, and I'm going to say it publicly here: have an exit strategy. If you don't have an exit strategy, don't move. Why?
What do you mean by exit strategy?
Decide. Do you want to come and die abroad? If you want to come and die abroad, that's fine. That's you. You can come here and end your life here. That's okay. It's someone's strategy. But for me, I think there's so much to Nigeria and so much to Africa that is just emerging and unveiling that makes me think that it may be unwise to stay disconnected from Africa. And that's the second point I was going to raise about what people think. Once people escape from Africa, they don't want to build the bridge back home. Okay. And that's another danger. Because what people don't realize is that you are crossing from where the grass will potentially get greener to a place where the grass is already fading, but still looks green. So when you move over to where the grass still looks green, but is already fading, to a place where the grass looks brown but will come back to look green in the future, and you've broken the bridge. Who is wise at the end of the day? So
Yeah.
that's why if you look at my itinerary, I'm in Nigeria, I'm in Africa 3-4 times a year. I do stuff in Africa, and for Africa is my mission. In fact, I made Africa my research agenda, and my business school knows it. My managers know it, and I'm unapologetic about it. Every research I'm doing is about building Africa. Sorry, I love Europe. I've lived here for 10 years, but I'm not going to stay here and pretend like I can help Europe build its own institutions. I can't, because I didn't grow up here. I don't know you well. But I know where I've come from, and I thank you for the knowledge you've given to me. But I can take the knowledge you've given to me to build my own country too. So I'm going to do that. So exit strategy is clear. I'm not saying exit strategy means at some point you relocate back to Nigeria, but at least know how you're going to build the bridge between here and there, and make sure that you keep a solid and a robust plan for your life or for your future, which is important. And all of that will then kind of, I think, those are the two key things that I'll say. That misconception of you pick money on the street and everywhere is good. The money system in this country is different from the money system in Nigeria.
Yeah.
They're underpinned by the same principles, but the vibe is different. You can access debt easily here. You can't access debt easily in Nigeria. People access debt in Nigeria, but here it's even easier to access debt. And because you can access debt a lot easier here, and because you have been thrown into that freedom arena again, people start to live above their means because they can afford, because they can access debt. And because you live above your means, you become indebted to the system. And the system has a way of putting you. So that's where social classes begin to emerge. And this is another conversation for another day for Black people. So I'm very interested research-wise in first generation migrants or immigrants.
Okay.
Why is it that a high percentage of people who have been first-time immigrants or first-generation immigrants have failed in some sense to create a better life for the second and third generation immigrants? Why is it that a high percentage have failed? It may be because, number one, they came to break the grounds and hustle, and you can't take that away from them. But they may not have handed over to this next generation of their own children what they really need to handle. So look at it. When you say you hustled, I understand you hustled, but you didn't understand the system. So when they told you to take student loan, student finance, you handed it over to your children. Now your child starts with I was speaking to a guy the other day. He's in a £60,000 debt. Is getting married to a lady who is in £70,000 debt. Together, they're starting their lives in the £130,000 hole. In Nigeria, you don't have that. In Nigeria, you will not start your life in a hole of over 50 million naira.
There's no such hole, Seth.
There's no such hole.
even if you wanted to access
go
it.
in, yes. Even if you wanted to go in.
There's no such hole. So someone is starting out their life with such a huge debt. And that's a second generation immigrant now. He's going to spend his life, if he's lucky, breaking free. And if he breaks free, what's going to hand over to the third generation or his own children when they come? So you can see that the forerunners become critically important. So before you come into this system, if you're going to move, you're welcome. We have doors, rooms, and houses that can take you. But two things you must do. Number one, you must understand the system. Number two, you must have a clear strategy for your family and for your life. And number three, please don't burn the bridge with Africa. No matter what Africa has done to you, don't burn the bridge, because Africa formed you. That was the cradle in which you were raised. And you cannot spit at the same cradle that raised you and say that you have now come into a country where you are accepted. Trust me, you'll always be a Black person. You always be that person that is not white, no matter how good your accent sounds. And that speaks to the idea of giving our children an identity. Giving those children an identity becomes important as well. So when you move over to the UK or move over to Canada, move over to the United States, what deliberate steps are you going to take to give your children an identity? Because I'm raising my daughter. I'm teaching her Yoruba. I'm teaching the girl Yoruba. She understands Yoruba language. She's 16 months. She understands me. If I speak the language, she gets it. She knows what she needs to do. And I'm praying it continues. Give them an identity, but you must have a clear strategy. You must understand the system. Otherwise, you will fall prey to a system that is designed to hold you down. And you'll discover that what you hand down to the next generation is not in itself a fantastic legacy. It waters down your legacy. My father died today, years ago. No, I'm not in debt, not in trouble with anybody. In fact, what he did was to give me a sure footing upon which I could start my life. How dare I now give my children a legacy of debt?
Mm.
And many people are in that quagmire right now. They've handed their children a legacy of debt. So,
Wow.
so that's it.
Wow.
That was very strong. That was, I mean, frankly, even if I know we've been going for some time now, but even if that was the only thing that we've picked from this conversation now, you know, honestly, I'm happy for that to be, you know, if someone told me there's a restriction on what information I can pass to people if they are moving to the UK, obviously the whole exercise of this thing is to help people with all the information and all the things we've discussed. But if I must pick one, is the block of conversation you just talked about now, you know, from the whole first generation immigrants to the very different lifestyle of you know, the very different credit system run here, which suddenly starts to make, you know, you're looking very well, but it's on credit. So are you doing very well? You know,
Yeah.
and it's a very blur line. It's I suppose because of how I don't know the word to use to describe it, but the way it's structured, you can almost never feel that actually this is debt you're going into. It is packaged such, you know, in such a way that
Made to look essential.
yeah. You know, when you're dipping into it, it's just never packaged in a way that will make you feel,
Pay us 20
you
pounds
know,
a month.
yeah,
Just 20.
yeah.
20 pounds. 20 pounds. How much is
Bring this
20
thing, let's
pounds?
be paying this thing,
How
Joe.
much
And
is
then
20 pounds?
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
then, you know, before you pay it off, they'll tell you actually the new one is available now. Would you like to upgrade?
You say yes,
Yeah.
yes. You pick up the new iPhone X on
Yeah.
credit and start paying
Yeah.
£42 a month. And then before you know it, you pick car, join.
Yeah.
You know it, you pick iPad, join. Then before you know
Yeah.
it, you pick, and then before you know it, your monthly outgoings on things you don't own, but you have started using. You know, can I tell you the
On
difference
things you
between?
don't own. That's the key phrase there. On things you don't own. Oh
Can I
But I
man.
tell?
use it.
Can I tell you the difference between legitimate pleasure and illegitimate pleasure? The
Carry on,
difference is
sir.
very simple. With legitimate pleasure, you pay before you access. With illegitimate pleasure, you access before you pay.
Hmm.
If you think about every illegitimate pleasure, adultery, fornication, you enjoy and then you pay later. The credit system here. But
Hmm.
legitimate pleasure, you wait until marriage before you start enjoying those benefits.
Hmm.
You wait, you will pay,
Hmm.
and then you start enjoying it. Is the dichotomy of the two systems.
Hmm.
The other system enforces you to enjoy what I call illegitimate pleasure.
Hmm.
Own a Ferrari before you can afford a Ferrari, but they tell you you can afford it. So you say, I can afford it because I can pay the monthly payment. But can
Yeah.
you really afford it?
Hmm.
So you sleep with that girl outside of wedlock because you think you can, but can you really afford to do that? Should you be doing that? Legitimate pleasure, illegitimate pleasure. People don't know these things. So they rush into the system. And so in Nigeria, they call it a curse. What is a blessing in disguise is seen as a curse because we run a cash-based society where you must have your money to pay for it. But let's now see the difference. So the other day, I was speaking with someone and I said, this same Nigeria that people are saying that things are not okay. Your mate that came to visit you, he bought his business class ticket, 1 point something million naira. He paid cash, not on credit card.
Hmm.
He came to Harrods and shopped. Where is eating? You that you are based in UK, you cannot eat there.
You just walk out. You just walk past.
You just walk by because the guy will shell. and pay.
Yeah.
I'm not
Yeah.
saying this is the same for everybody, but if you look at that line of best fit across the narratives generally,
Yeah.
whenever my brother comes to visit me, he may not buy the whole world, but he will buy things. He will go home. One thing I'm confident of is that he is not in debt. When I'm going home, why do I have to use my credit card and max out my credit card because I want to take things home and then come back and start paying the debt every month?
Hmm. Hmm.
That's terrible.
Yeah.
Sorry, Azim, I know you're going to ask a question now, but I think we can catch up on this one. I think it'll be nice to do a different session. But one of the things you mentioned in part of your answer to that last question about first generation immigrants, I think it'll be nice if we can arrange, a session to discuss that, because
we can talk about that a little bit more. Yeah.
I think there's plenty to discuss there, and I think the different groups of immigrants have fared.
We can talk about that. Yeah, and we can also talk about the different ethnic and cultural communities and how their perspectives are widely different from each other. So the Asian community has a different approach to doing things. The African community, as in fact, I put out a hypothesis which I wrote down. If I get funding, I'll do that research. Excuse me. That even though theoretically we are from a collectivist society, so if you look at Hofstede's study on culture, it puts Africa under that collectivist society. So there's individualistic and collectivist society. But I've noticed that we deceive ourselves if we assume we're a collectivist society, or we're still a collectivist society, because I've noticed that once we cross over into the UK, the height of our collectivism tends to drop to almost a borderline of individualistic tendencies.
Yeah.
And that there's been a lot of triggers that have warranted those, that shift in orientation from, where we're coming from to where we are now as a community, and how that affects our community orientation. So when Martin was talking earlier and you were talking earlier about people coming here and saying, where do I find things? I noticed that the guys I was rolling with in the ACF, Africa Christian Fellowship I spoke about, who were in their 50s and in their 60s, still had a strong sense of community. So they came looking for us. That was their philosophy. They came to the campus to find us, to say, a young man has just arrived from Nigeria to do a postgraduate study. Let us go and find them. Let us make them feel welcome. That was the orientation. Now, the guy who comes in from Nigeria is running away from them.
Yeah.
Thinking that they want to trap him.
Yeah.
But let me not go into all of that. So that's the thing.
Yeah, you're so right, man. When I'm not saying anything is because there are like 1 million things I want to be responding to, but even just the last thing you said. But I think we should definitely have another chat for these things. Even when you talked about the bridge back home, and that's also a big issue, or a big topic rather, because people just, like you said, now I've escaped, to hell. If you see my leg again, cut them. Those kind of things. I mean, we can discuss that as well. But I think we in terms of time, we just like close to our budget. But I'll just ask you this one question. Maybe might be my last question, unless Martin has something to ask. What do you miss most about Nigeria, about back home, since you came here? What do you think? Man, if I could have exported this thing, all the way to the UK, I would have been fine. What do you miss most, having lived there for 10 years?
So maybe just so I'm a foodie. So maybe just fresh goat meat.
Okay.
Maybe that. This goat meat matter.
Oh my goodness.
That's another side of me. Food.
I was expecting some philosophical answer, and I heard
philosophical game over this man. The truth is that
there's a bit of philosophy in that now.
There's a bit of philosophy in it. Yes, it is.
That's what he wants to explain now.
Yes, I want to explain the philosophy. So the blessing is that we live in a country that has also assimilated the Nigerian culture. And at times, you even go to certain parts of London and you still don't know whether you're in Nigeria or you're in London, because you just keep hearing either our native dialects flowing around you, know. without any apologies. So what that has done is that it has created a system that makes me feel like I'm home, even though I'm far away from home. In terms of food, I can access. So when you look at the core of a person's culture, it comes down to things like language, food,
Yeah.
dressing, nuances, and all those major cultural blocks, major blocks of culture. I speak my local language with people because there are people to speak it with here in the
Yeah.
UK. We have a community of over 1.5 million Nigerians in the UK. So we have that huge community. In terms of food, I go to, I walk I drive just 20 minutes away from my house, 10 minutes away from my house, even 5 minutes itself. There are these Asian shops that onboard a lot of African food. And also
Yeah.
you go to there, you get like proper Ijebu gari, and I can make gari, I can make egusi. The things that the food wise, the only thing I haven't found is the original goat meat with the skin on it, and the smell is calling you to devour. That's the one I can find. That's the one I can import. That's why I said that's the only thing I can import.
Okay.
But generally, in terms of, you still find meat. You still find this
Yeah.
Baruf goat meat that they sell, which is still good enough for the job.
Yeah.
In terms of clothing, Owambe parties are still plenty in this London.
Yep.
So
Yep.
everything that could have made me say I'm missing home. Maybe the last thing to say is to import all my family members, the ones that I love and hold there, bring all of them down here. But I know that's not going to happen. So for me, I'm not really missing anything. Thankfully, technology has made it accessible. I've spoken to my mom today. I'm going to speak to my brother after this call. We do video calls, we chat, we gist, and then they come, they frequent. My sister-in-laws come, my brother comes, I go. But at the end of the day, we see each other. So the things that could, so like in the 50s and 60s, where all these major culture blocks I just mentioned
Yeah. Yeah.
were not readily accessible. Food wasn't
Mm-hmm.
accessible. The person to speak the language wasn't accessible. If you dressed in a kaftan, you were strange on the street. In fact, they would think you are one Wakanda king, and people start looking at you like they should probably arrest you. And
Yeah.
food is not there. So by the time you look at all those things, then it was not there. But now it's no longer an issue for us. So what's there to miss? At least because I'm living in London, no, I don't think there's anything to miss about home. Well, maybe, even maybe a few hot spots here and there where we're going to drink pepper soup. Maybe just that. But other than that, nothing more.
Yeah. No, that's good. That's good. No, that was something that I will not forget about this interview. So good pepper soup. Goat
The one
meat
with the
pepper soup.
skin
With the skin
intact.
specifically.
The one that calls you.
The one that calls you, say, come.
I calls it from beyond, and
Mm.
that's it. It's been really good. Martin, I don't know if you
And Guinea
have
fowl too. Guinea fowl. They don't have Guinea fowl. Proper Guinea fowl here. Guinea fowl. Roasted on suya.
You've not left Lagos and you're going to the village.
Guinea fowl and ram suya. So all those things, and this inwenu, they're the things that.
Martin, do you have any last word before we wrap up?
I certainly would have loved to ask some more questions, as I'm sure you would have as well, Obina.
Yeah.
But I strongly doubt that this is our last conversation with Yinka. But I think the only thing I was going to just say after what he mentioned now about the food that he misses, I can't help but feel that it's really not just about the food, but more about the community and the style in which we share some of those meals when we're back home.
Yeah.
I think if it's pepper soup, if you rally around, you can get pepper soup if that's what you want.
There's pepper soup. There's pepper soup, but there's not that.
There's just the style in which we do our community there. I think
we have it here too. That's what I was saying. I go to weddings, I go to parties, and I see that
Martin, you should move to London. Martin.
Yeah, you should move to London. Bright. Oh, sorry, Bright. I even found the seaside. Sorry. Sorry. I forgot. You don't have a Niger community. You have some Nigerians there, but you guys are posh Nigerians. That's where you find us, the loud ones.
I won't really respond to that posh part yet. Let me leave that for posterity.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, nothing else from me, Yinka. That has been very That's very good. I mean, there are a lot of things that I picked up, you know, and some of them just one-liners or things that, you know how it is where you've seen something that you learned something from before, but it didn't click at the time. You know, someone has said something to you before and you made light of it until someone else now throws another lesson from it, now telling you about that same thing. And I suppose the main thing I'm referring to here is towards the start of the conversation when you said, you know, one of the key ways to get into or to get the benefits of the system here once you come in, whether in terms of relationships or connections, is to get into one form of service, whether church, whether charities. And I just remember that one of the guys we've spoken to as well, and when he told me this, that's why I'm saying sometimes you hear it and it doesn't really click. I've had this conversation with him before, and we talked about how, you know, when he first came in, you know, applied for jobs. We came in at the same time. We kept applying for jobs, rebounds. Everything was just throwing back. So for him, one of the things he used to just get some work experience on his CV was to get involved with church. He was helping them with some of their, you know, sound and all that kind of stuff. And I think it played a role in him eventually getting something that has stayed long term, and he's still working here now. But it had never really clicked to me that actually there's a serious concept there until you said it now. I'm now thinking back to one or two other, including my own self, and how it has helped me. So yeah, I suppose, you know, without dragging it for too long, just to say, you know, thank you. It's been a very, very good conversation, and I picked up quite a few points. I think it will be nice to flesh out some of them when we talk again.
Thanks, guys. Thanks for this. I mean, it's been great meeting you
Yeah.
guys, and I think you have a great. You're doing a great job. If I'm going to be honest with you, if you want me to flesh out anything, just give me a heads up. We can always work something out and pick up on a few of these things and probably delve deeper into them. But you know, other than, you know, if you want to learn from my lesson, I think, you know, what this data you're getting from myself and from other, you know, kind people who have, you know, graciously, you know, spoken with you, is something that I think, you know, is a huge gold mine that will form a huge data set that you could actually use to do great things. Apart from the social element of it, you know, impacting people, it's a big, you know, deal. But I think you guys can position this to actually become something that will like be like a go-to resource of some kind for potential immigrants, whatever that may look like. And yeah, I think it's a lot of really good stuff. So thanks for the opportunity.
Yeah. Thanks very much for that, Yinka. And big thanks to you, man. I mean, just hearing from you, everybody knows you're definitely a very busy man. But we just really thank you for coming and sharing. In fact, even listening to you speak, it's easy to know that you've got like loads of things to say. I'm even sorry at some point, you know, I had to interject, or, you know, but
It's okay.
you really have, you know, stuff to say. And just to say thanks for coming and sharing from your wealth of experience. We've barely scratched the surface, I suspect. Hopefully we get more conversations and then, you know, just make impacts together.
Yeah.
So thanks again for coming.
No worries then. Thanks for having me, guys.